Estimator. Now, this Reno Estimator can be quick or it can be a little bit slow when you're new, but once you get good at it and you understand how to put numbers into it, this is going to be a more detailed budget than the desktop Reno Estimator. The desktop Reno Estimator is meant to get you in the ballpark. This is meant for you to get a really good budget. So when we go and look at houses in person, we'll actually use this quick Reno Estimator and fill in the details. So this takes a little bit of time to get used to, so it's not quick to learn, but once you get good at it, you can really get these budgets very accurate. I walk through a house and it takes me about 5 minutes to 8 minutes to do one of these, and it's within $1,000 or two, so it's a really strong, very solid budget. What we love about this quick Reno Estimator is it forces us to look at about 50 different line items and assign a cost to them. Now, the key to it is you don't have to be perfect. You just want to get it in the ballpark. It tends to add up really well. The big thing that makes budgets go really awry is when you completely miss really big items. So it's not saying like, let's pretend that the roof is, you think it's 5,000, but I'm like, no, it's really 4,000. That's not as big of a difference as you completely forgetting the roof at a total of 4,000 and not having anything in it all. And that's what a lot of people do, because there's so many items in the house. They often will, get 25 of the items and forget 10 of the items or 15 that need to be put in. Those 15 items having nothing accounted for will really make a budget way too low, or people tend to just like really vaguely throw really high numbers on things because they're not sure. So I'm going to walk you through the quick Reno Estimator. It's this video is going to be a little bit longer, but this is going to be a great video. This video is going to teach you a lot about the details, and I'll do my best to explain everything, but this is a very advanced subject. If you're new, then you should listen to it just so you get a feel for it, but know that it takes time to master this. It takes practice. You want to go out. If you're in the mastermind versus just a regular program, then we do go out and do this in field and learn this, and if you're in the high level group, then you actually become a complete master of this. Our very highest level group will learn this to a complete level of mastery where they can get this down to a science, because part of being a very high level house flipper is that you are great at this. I've gotten very good at it over the years. Any student who works with us at a high level will become a master of this. But if you're pretty new to the program, new to house flipping, just know you don't have to be a master today. It takes time, and just get in and just start doing the work, and just know you got to start from somewhere, and this will really help you out. This is a great tool. It's really useful. It's the exact tool I use in my business, by the way. So if I'm going out looking at a house, I pull this exact same tool up. You're pulling it right off my computer. This is not something for a program or for teaching. This is literally a business system I use every day to make a lot of money. So let's jump right in and let's start the training. All right, so this is the quick Reno Estimator. This is the document. This is the Excel spreadsheet that we use. I've been using a version of this from day one in my business. Now, this thing used to be just a couple lines on an Excel spreadsheet that I got my little brother to put together for me because we couldn't remember to do everything. When I first started doing this, I literally would just write this on a piece of paper and write down everything I could think of. And like I said, I'd find that I would get it mostly right, but I'd end up forgetting 5 to 7 items, and it would make me come in with a 35K renovation when it was really like 42 to 45. And so we want to make sure that we go through all these and we ask the question, do we need one of these line items? So let's start at the top with decks. So decks, I have a little bit of teaching here where it says 10 by 10 deck usually takes 2 guys 3 days at $20 to $25 a square foot. So again, I'm not going to be able to teach you this in deep detail, but I want you to get this as a ballpark for if we had to put a deck on, a 10 by 10 deck would be about $2,500. You see labor and materials, we split everything up. And you get a feel for how many guys it takes by how many days. So in general, when we're thinking of pricing, we're always thinking how many guys, how many days. So quick Reno Estimator, we get in, we know that we need to put something for this. So if you're not sure, you just want to be like, hey, $2,000 for the deck. That's better than nothing. You don't have to be perfect. You just got to have something in there, because if you do have a deck you need to put in, well, you got to have some money for it. Now, windows, this is a pretty easy one. There's some that I'm going to be able to teach you with absolute ease, and some will take a more advanced level of knowledge to understand. But windows is one of the easiest ones. Windows cost $250 each, so if you walk around the house and you count that you have 15 windows that need to be replaced, then this is pretty easy math that I don't know right now. I think $37.50. Okay, I might have gotten that right. If I didn't, do not don't call me out on it, but you know, you can use a calculator. But if you got like 10 windows, it's $2,500. That's really simple math. And so that's a really easy one. Now, a big question about windows though is like, when do we know we need to replace them? I do my best never to replace windows if they're vinyl and they're in good working order, or they can be repaired. It's always cheaper to clean a window and repair it than it is to replace a window. Now, the key is it does need to be vinyl and it needs to be in pretty good working order, but what you don't want to get too overwhelmed about is sometimes vinyl windows will be a little dirty because people weren't clean or they didn't take great care of it. Well, those usually can be cleaned. Vinyl can be cleaned with a little bit of bleach and brung back to looking like new again. And if there's a couple repairs throughout the house, I've seen people replace whole houses of windows for like $3,000 or $4,000, and when they could have spent like $500 to $600 repairing them and cleaning them. Well, that's a big savings if you think about that. And my experience has been it doesn't cost the house to sell for anything less. So as long as the windows are good working order and they're vinyl. When we tend not to keep windows is when they're wood. The only exception when we would keep a window that's wood is if it's in a historical neighborhood and it's a requirement to have a wood window. But for the most part, if we have wood windows or old metal windows, then we don't keep those. But if we do have vinyl windows, we try to save them. And if you do need to replace them, it's as simple as just adding $250 a window times all the windows that you need. Paint exterior. This is something that we use to save a lot of money. When you look at a house, and let's just pretend it has old siding on it and it's like a weird looking green, a lot of people think you need to put new siding on to make the house look new. Most people don't know you can get a spray gun and you can spray a house like a nice khaki color or gray color that looks really nice, and that only costs about $1,200 in labor and $400 in material. So $1,600 total, and that's on the high end. That sometimes it's cheaper if the house is a little bit smaller, but that's the high end, $1,600. If you were to do vinyl siding there, you're talking about $7-8 grand. Again, in this scenario, this would be a great example of, spending way too much to do something that's not necessary. So painting exterior, something that if you see the house looks a little bit ugly, painting exterior probably will make it look nice. Now, landscaping. Landscaping is a pretty wild one, but for the most part, you want to put in somewhere between $1,000 to $2,500 for landscaping on a pretty simple project. We pretty much always spend at least $1,000 putting a nice bed out front, cutting the grass, and just keeping the grass up through the renovation. If it's summertime, you're going to have a lot more to do than if it's winter. You won't have as much, but the difference in winter is you don't have to cut grass, but then the plants you have to buy are much more expensive because they're not readily in stock at Home Depot, and you have to go to like a specialty nursery and you pay a lot more. So it's about an even outcome. So I usually just, if you see the house needs some basic landscaping, then $1,000 is fine. If it needs a little heavier end, like let's say a little more work, you go $2,000. And now when you see it needs like crazy landscaping, like it's a complete jungle and there's trees falling over, something like that might be like $3,000 to $4,000. Know that I'm not going to be able to give you the answers to be perfect, but just that basic understanding of it really helps you get in the ballpark. Because again, if you were to put $3,000 in and end up being $4,000, that's all fine. Because some of the things you'll be high, some you'll be low. At the end of the day, you'll be really close. And the fact that you're just paying attention to each of these items will give you a huge advantage over a lot of your competitors, because most of your competitors are not line iteming this out. They're getting a GC to give them an estimate, and the GC later on tells them they forgot 50 things and then gives them a bunch of change orders because they're like, oh, we found this piece of trim that was bad, we need another $20,000, and you just can't control your costs. So doing it this way is the way that all really great house flippers who run really very predictable businesses do it. So I want to get you started. I want you to see at least the most basic version of this so you can get a feel for it. Exterior doors. Excuse me for a second. So exterior doors, we see that we have like a standard door is $250 to install it. Those doors usually run us about $300 in material. You can see we have $300 for installation for a sliding door, and then that we basically always put the labor time, 2 guys, 1 day, because it gives us a feel of like what we should be paying to get these things done. So you can see here we have $750. This really is just a door count thing. You go through a house and it needs 2 doors. They're going to cost $300. They're going to be $250 to install. You just run the math on it. It roughly would be $300 for each door, $600, and then $500 for the labor is $1,100. And then you need doorknobs for $100 each, about $1,300. Again, if you threw 1,000, you threw 1,500 in, you would be in the ballpark. You just need to get it close. I don't want you spending like 9 years on this, because you could make this take a really long time. Now, if you own a home and you're under contract, that's when we get into detail. If you were to go to your house and spend a whole day there doing this, that would be totally acceptable and a good use of your time. But when you're looking at a house to buy it, that's when we have to really be treat our time and respect it, and make sure that we're only maybe doing a half hour on this. If you wanted to spend an hour on your first one, do it with the intention of getting faster, and over time getting down to about 15-20 minutes, because that's a really ideal amount of time you want to spend. So we get to fence right here. We can see we got $5 to $6 installed, and $8 to $10 for material. So 100 linear foot of fence. A linear foot is like one actual foot. It would be about right here we got about $2,000. So essentially what that is, about $6 plus $10, $16 a foot for the fence. That's if we had to put a privacy fence up. We generally put privacy fences up when we have really awful neighbors. Now, the only way I can combat a neighbor who has a lot of trash, or sometimes we'll have like cemeteries next to our houses. I don't know why. I literally just had a house recently that has like a cemetery in the backyard, and it seems like we buy a lot of stuff with weird neighbors, maybe a church in the backyard or something you want to hide. Well, privacy fences help a lot when you have stuff like that. It'll just help give them a little bit of privacy and feel like their backyard is a little bit more private when necessary. For the most part, we only repair fences. We don't generally put those fences in unless we are using it for a very, very specific reason and to help us sell the property. So that's fences. And then sheds and garages. So you can see here we got single door, $600 to $800, double door, $800 to $1,100. So this is what we would pay to have a door installed. So this right here is single door, and we're talking about garage doors, by the way. So if you have a garage and it needs a door on it, then it's $600 to $800 for a single, and about $800 to $1,100 for a double. So that's something you can easily add up and easily see if it's any good. If the garage door looks like it's in good working order and it's either metal or vinyl or something that's acceptable, then you're fine. If it's really beat down wood, then likely we're not going to be able to save that. The next line is curb appeal. So we have install shutters, mailbox, and numbers. Curb appeal for me is what we call kind of curb appeal. Would be like when you walk up to the house, what are the things that make the house look really nice? Like a set of shutters and a nice mailbox and some numbers and maybe a flower pot hanging off the windows. Those things really make a house look nice. You'd be surprised how a few $100 of that kind of stuff could really set your house aside from your competitors. Most of your competitors do the very basic or nothing at all. And curb appeal is really big. I know you guys, if you watch HGTV, it's kind of how I got into house flipping, so I'm sure you probably watched HGTV at some point, then you probably heard that curb appeal is pretty important. So I don't spend a lot on it. You can see $400. Normally, I'm in that ballpark, anywhere from like $300 to $500. I don't go crazy, but that $300 to $500 gives you a really big bang for your dollar. It's not a lot of money, but it makes a really big difference. So next we have exterior woodwork. How much labor, to install, this is going to be more of a custom thing. So if we go outside and we see that around the outside of the house, there's some wood that's got a little bit of rot to it, you can generally just put $500 to $1,000 for that work. That will require getting estimates and figuring out how much needs to be done. If there's a lot of woodwork, then you might want to put more money, but in general, we usually will have just a couple things that need to be repaired or fixed. If that's the case, then you would just go from there. Now we're getting to the interior of the house and framing. So framing is pretty easy to measure, but it is a lot of measuring. So for every linear foot of framing, so imagine we had a basement that was 10 by 10. What that would mean is that each wall is 10 foot. You have 4 walls, so that's 40 linear feet. So 40 linear feet would mean that we would cost us $400 to do that work. So that's the labor part of it. So it's $10 a foot. We would pay someone $400 in labor to do that 40 feet. And now, materials are going to usually cost something close to that. So if you pay someone $400, you might say, okay, framing that 10 by 10 basement cost me $800. So again, we just want to get close and get in the ballpark. Now we got structural beam. If we need to put in a structural beam, we usually pay $500 to $800 for someone to put structural beams in. Now the $500 is going to be like one beam, and $800 obviously is probably going to be if they got to do 2 beams. We usually run into these beams being put in when we're opening up walls to create that layout that we talked about that's really optimal, that really open when you first walk in. We love creating the open great room. Well, that's done by putting up structural beams so we can support the load. It's not as complicated as it might seem. It's a pretty reasonably cheap cost, and we do it all the time because at the end of the day, it's a big difference maker in the house. And that generally runs about $2,000 to $3,000 if you got to do a little bit of framing. You walk in a house and it's got the layout that you need and you don't need to change anything, then your framing bill would be zero. Right? I mean, or imagine you go in and, okay, we just need to frame the basement. Maybe it's like $1,500 then. So this gives you some ballpark, but you do want to take a note. Do we need to frame, or is there a lot of stuff we need to do in the house? Often when we get a good deal, it's because the house needs a lot of redesign and it takes a little bit of vision. Again, in some of the higher level trainings, we really train you very well on how to walk into a house and understand exactly how to design a house in a really detailed way. So that way you walk in, you know exactly what you're going to create. We teach people how to do drawings. This thing gets very, very high level when we get past the most basic training. And I'm sure you see even in this basic training, it's way more high level than most basic training you have out there, because we really want you to be a confident house flipper. I want you to have all the details, all the information that you need so you can go out and make good choices and make money in this business. The smartest people make the most money in this business in general. It doesn't always mean they're smart at everything. So sometimes I would say that I'm not the smartest guy. I dropped out to 10th grade and went back and got my GED. But when it comes to house flipping, I'm very confident, and I did find something that I loved to learn when I got into house flipping. So I wasn't always a great student until I got into this, and then realized that I've always been a bad student because I wasn't very passionate about the things I was learning. House flipping was my first thing that I became very passionate about, and needless to say, I ended up being a great student because I loved it. And so I guess that's a good lesson for us in life. If we're interested in something, we tend to take it and do really great at it. So a lot of this training so that you can have really good high level proficiency. So next is demo, and demo is going to be right here. We have some like $500 for a 30-yard dumpster. Excuse me for a second. We've been doing this for a long time, so we're losing our voice. $500 for a dumpster. So dumpsters, we usually get dumpsters, and they come in 30 and 40 yard sizes. You want to know that because one should be a little cheaper than the other, but we just say about $500 for a 30 to 40 yards, pretty standard pricing. Or if you're going to pay someone to take like a pickup truck load, and let's pretend they're going to have little side panels and they're going to have all that, that's usually about $100 to $130 a load. A truckload, by the way, about 4 to 5 truckloads will equal a dumpster. Now, the reason we love truckloads is because truckloads, they'll come and get a load as they need it, where if we have a dumpster and we only have a need a load, then that dumpster stays empty for many, many days. And what our experience has been is that when we have empty dumpsters, that neighbors tend to throw a lot of stuff in it. They do their spring cleaning in the middle of the winter or whenever it happens. A dumpster is like the community cleanup tool, so we don't like having dumpsters unless we know we can fill them and get them out of there very quickly. And you can see we put about $1,500, but demo is not just dumpsters. So dumpsters are going to be the tool we use to get rid of the trash that we create. But there's also the work of demoing the house, like getting all the furniture out of it, tearing out any walls, maybe tearing out old kitchens and bathrooms. In general, we'll usually be right around, with demo, we'll usually be about $2,000 to $3,000 for demo, and that usually covers most demo. If you go in and you have just about no demo at all, the house is really clean, you're keeping a lot of stuff, then maybe it's like $1,000. But demo does represent the initial demo when you start the renovation, but it also represents any trash that you create throughout the renovation. So even if you weren't demoing any of the house, you probably would create at least $500 to $1,000 in truckloads that you have to take away just from the trash that's created from like doing painting and flooring and all this stuff. There will be some trash that's created no matter how clean a house is. So there's always going to be some money in for demo. Sheetrock, this one's a little bit easier. Now, at least the part of doing sheetrock is pretty easy. Sheetrock is generally paid $15 to $20 per sheet for the labor, and the material cost is about $10 to $15 a sheet. So we were talking today, and we actually figured out that about $30 to $35 a sheet total is a very fair price. So it's pretty simple math. If you have 100 sheets of sheetrock that you need hung and finished, you would pay about $3,000 to $3,500 for labor and material. So no, if you got 200 sheets, you're looking at about $7,000. 300 sheets, roughly about $13,000. I mean, about $12,000 actually, or $10,000 to $12,000. So again, you don't have to get this number perfect. I'm not asking you to run around with a tape measure, but like definitely make sure that if there's a lot of sheetrock needed throughout the house, that you're putting something pretty reasonable in. Now, we also have to consider that if there's just minor point up, that would be touching up all the holes. Maybe you have like and most houses will buy, even if most of the sheetrock's pretty good, we might have like a area where the roof leaked or a toilet leak. There's usually some kind of distressed area in the house where it needs some work. So you might just throw like $1,000 for fixing and doing a couple repairs and touching the house up for that, if you don't need a bunch of sheetrock. And if you need sheetrock, a lot of it, then you'd probably want to get a count, or at least get a rough idea how much you need. Again, you can guesstimate that. If you think you need a basement, it's probably going to be about 75 to 100 sheets. If you need a whole house done, usually you're running about 175 to 300 sheets for a whole house. So, if you just get in the ballpark on this will really just get you a basic budget to start with. And then once you know you have the property, you own the property, that's when you want to go in and start tape measuring and really starting to break this stuff down. Interior doors, this is a pretty easy one also. We usually pay about $30 to $40 a door to install it. Bifolds are about $50 to $75, and then access doors, we talked about that before when we get into like the big doors. They're like $75 to $125. So this is what we pay to install them, but then we have to buy them. So if you're actually buying a door, usually we can just round that up to about $100 for an interior door. We can get them cheaper depending on size, but if we just say that a door is going to be about $140, and we know we have 10 interior doors that we need to completely rip out and re-put in new ones, well, that's going to be about $1,400 for 10 doors. So we throw some money in and we know what we're dealing with. That's if we need all new doors. Now, if you have good doors throughout the house, it is very possible that you could just replace a couple broken doors. We see that a lot where maybe 2 or 3 doors in the house have been kicked in or have big holes in them, and then we easily can just take and replace those and fix them for like $100 and keep it really cheap. When we go through a house, one of the things that I believe in is looking at a house like a restoration, not like a renovation. When we think that we're going to restore the house, it makes us come from the frame of mind is that what can we save? Because most of the time people, if we're saving good stuff with character, older stuff, people actually appreciate that. We see a lot of houses, and we just sold a house recently to one of our mastermind students, John and Jay, and they have this beautiful house in the Hamilton area, and this house has really got so much character and charm to it. And I think some people's initial thought would be to kind of gut this out. And one of the things that we were able to walk through and teach them and show them was that for about $60K, they can renovate this old house that easily could have been $90K if they would have completely ripped everything out. But because they're saving so much, and people really love saving old trim and old doors, and they often have great character to them. When we tend to rip things out is when the house is just all mixed matched, and this house was not the case. It was actually a kind of a grandmom house. It was well taken care of. So know that you can save some stuff. If you know you can save some doors, go for it. I'd love to see you save doors, as long as they don't look really ugly and they're not cheap replacement doors, but maybe there's some older 2-panel doors or nice 6 panels and you just got to replace a couple. That's all going to be fine. The next is the trim. So trim, we have a lot of breakdowns of like $1 to $2 a square, a linear foot for the baseboard, $2 to $3 for crown molding. This is the cost of the labor, and then the materials like 40 cents. But if you just want to say that like it's about $2 to $3 a foot, and for a house trim, I usually, without even looking, just put 1,000 and 1,000 for the trim if I need it. So if I know I need to put all new trim in the house, I'll go 1,000 and 1,000. If I got to do all new doors, I go 1,000 and 1,000. I've never really went wrong. I mean, as a very baseline, if I just don't have time to count everything and measure everything, if I put $4,000 in for the trim and doors on a standard rehab, I'm usually pretty close. And I've never really seen that to be really far off. So, I mean, again, that's if you need all these things. If you only need a couple doors or a little bit of trim, then you'd want to adjust this down, because we don't want to throw $2K in if we only need 500. So, let's get it in the ballpark, but, do get a little bit of a level of like, of actual detail. We don't want to go too crazy. It's finding that nice balance. When we go to kitchen cabinets, we see that we put 125 to 140 per linear cabinet square foot or a linear foot of cabinets. Now, how we would measure that, this is a question a few people have asked. So let's imagine we have a wall that's 10 foot long. That would be 10 linear foot. And one student asked me, does that mean 10 linear foot on the bottom and 10 on the top? It actually is combined. So when we say 10 linear feet, it's combined that we would have, that's for the bottom and for the top. So it does cover both. So if you have a 10-foot wall that needs top and bottom cabinets, we'd be looking on about $1,200 to $1,400 for those cabinets. So that's not a lot of cabinets. That's a really small kitchen, by the way, and that's about where these would run. And these would be for pretty good cabinets. And you can see here that we put material and labor costs for cabinets. Usually is running about $1,600 to $3,000. It's a very true statement. If you don't have a measurement, then you can just go with this rough ballpark that, you know, depending on the size of kitchen, you're usually going to run like $1,600 to $3,000 for the material, and then the labor cost is $400 to $600. So if we just randomly threw in for most kitchens somewhere around like $2,500 to $4,000, that covers most kitchens that are for a standard renovation. If your house is really small, you'd want to be on the low end. If your house is bigger, you definitely want to be on the high end. And if you have something that's just way out of whack, like a really big house, then obviously that's going to cost a lot more. So we go to vanities. This is a pretty easy one. The only question mark for vanities is how many bathrooms are you going to have in the house, and do you have a master bathroom? Because standard bathrooms are literally going to be $200 to $300 vanities that we buy from Home Depot. That we usually get nice ones. They're on sale in an end cap. They come with a mirror, and $200 to $300 we can get like a 24-inch to 30-inch vanity. We love to use those in like the secondary bathrooms. So secondary bathrooms would be if you had a 3-bedroom house and say one of the bedrooms is a master suite, we would put that in the second bath that maybe the kids use, and maybe the basement bath, because they're really cheap, they're nice, and no one really cares about really high-end stuff at first-time home buyer price points. Now, in order to make the house really nice, however, we do like to spend a little bit more money on a nice vanity, like for the double vanity, say for the master suite, if we can put it in there. And those usually run about $700 to $1,000, so they are a lot more expensive. The labor cost to put vanities in is about $50 each. I mean, they don't take very much time to do. I mean, I've seen them installed in 10 minutes. I've actually seen people take more time taking them out the box than installing them. So they're pretty quick and easy from a labor standpoint. Most of the work is picking it out and getting it to the house and taking it out of the box. And once you're out of the box, you just kind of sit it there, shim it up, and throw a few screws in and caulk the top on, and it's all good. So not a lot of labor, but you do want to be very selective and make sure you're saving money. So you can see here, we just put about $1,450 for these couple bathrooms. That usually will cover you pretty well, just depending, about $1,000 to $2,000, just depending on how many baths you have. So tile is something we can measure, but in general, I when I'm very in a rush and I don't want to like measure the bathrooms out, I'll usually just put $2,000 to $2,500 for tile, and that very quickly just gets me a number in there, and that number is very close. I never find that number to be too far off. It could be, 500 low, maybe 500 high, but it's pretty close. If you really want to start measuring out, you can see that it's $3 to $4 a foot to install, $1 for the backer board. The backer board is the board that goes under tile. You got $10 a square foot for insulation of backsplash, because that's a little more expensive, because that stuff that goes on your countertops. It's not a lot to do. And then you can also see that like the tile itself that we use is about $1 a foot, but you can go up to $2 a foot, so it's somewhere between $1 to $2 a foot to buy the tile. That's the material, and then you got about $5 to $10 a foot for that backsplash tile. That's usually a lot more expensive, but that's definitely the more complicated answer if you want to measure. But if you just put $200 to $2,500, depending on how many bathrooms you got, that definitely would get you in the ballpark and keep your budget from being too out of whack. So that's what I used to do when I'd run through a house. I would just say need trim, need doors, need tile, and I just start throwing it in. And when I did it very quickly like that, I found my budgets would be really close, surprisingly. It was kind of scary how close they were. So this next one is paint. And paint it's a pretty easy one, because we can do $1 per square foot for the labor, and then we got about 50 cents for the material. So if we just went $1.50 a square foot times the square foot of the house, then we would know what we need for paint and material. So let's use a 1,000 square foot first floor, but maybe we have 500 in the basement. What we would do is we would actually run that at 1,500 square feet. So if we take 1,500 square feet times 1,500, that's about $1.50 a foot times 1,500 square foot. It's about $3,000. You can see we got right here about $2,600 But somewhere between 2,500 to 3,000 usually will cover your painting for a renovation for a standard rehab. So again, if you don't want to try to measure everything, this is a great ballpark. This is one for many years I would just walk through and just be like 2,500 bucks. 2,000, 25, and I would throw it in. These are very random numbers, but they're very close. And if you don't have a lot of time, you just need to get a pretty close number, you'll do very good just by putting 2,500 in for the paint to 3,000 max, just depending on the size of the house. Now, doorknobs, it's pretty easy. If you need 10 doorknobs, usually doorknobs are about 20 bucks a piece to install, and we just go ahead and throw in about $30 a door for the doorknobs and for the installation, and that should cover it. And that usually will treat you well. So if you did $30 times 10 doors, you just put 300 bucks in. This looks like it's for about 15 doors. A little closer to 15. So doorknobs are pretty cheap and they're quick and easy to install. This bath accessories, mirrors, towel bars, and all that. This is just those things that you see in the bathrooms, like the 3-piece, like the toilet paper holder, the towel holder, and the little hand towel holder. Well, we don't pay a lot. We pay like 50 bucks to install those. So if you have 2 bathrooms, $60. I mean, if you did miss this line item, this would be the one to miss because it only represents usually $100 to $200. We want to make sure we're not missing like $2,500 for a towel, obviously. That's a big game changer when you see a lot of those adding up. Now we have hardwood. So hardwood's pretty easy. We usually, if we're doing hardwood floors, we know that if we're doing living room, dining room, kitchen, and we just took a quick measurement to say, okay, it's a 10 by 10 room that we're doing, that 10 by 10, you go 10 times 10, and that's how much your square footage is. So you have 10 times 10, you have 100 square feet. 100 square foot times $5 a foot is $500. So if we know we had 500 square foot, it's $2,500. Most houses usually will take somewhere between 300 to 600 square feet of wood for the living room, dining room, kitchen. So that tells you that somewhere between $2,000 to $3,000 is usually going to be really close. It's going to definitely keep you in the ballpark for the wood. The wood is another one where you can just put 2,000 or 2,500 and you'll be very close to right most of the time. Cleaning's 300 bucks, simple one. Power washing like 200, real simple. I do have management, but that's like I pay a project manager for you. You don't have to worry about that. We do throw $1,000 in. This stays the same every time. I just keep a flat 1,000 in for home inspection repairs because they'll be there. They'll need those. Now we get into like plumbing. So plumbing, I want to keep really simple for you. Most houses don't need completely new plumbing. If it did need completely new plumbing, then you would be looking at somewhere between $5,000 to $8,000 for plumbing. But most houses can just be repaired and fix the things that are broke. That's what we do for most plumbing. So I usually could just throw about $1,000 for material and like $3,000 for labor, right around somewhere between like $3,000 to $5,000 for the plumbing is going to keep me really good. Same thing with electric. I usually want to keep about $3,000 to $5,000 total for electric. That usually covers most houses because we're not usually going to do all new electric and plumbing. And so quick, easy ways you walk through. If the house looks like it needs more electrical stuff, maybe put it at $5,000, less electrical stuff, and we can save some things. Maybe it has good box and has good plugs and stuff in the house. It might be more around like the $3,000 range. So $3,000 to $5,000 on the plumbing, $3,000 to $5,000 on the electric. Again, you don't have to be perfect on this. If you're analytical like me, you got to let loose and just kind of go with it and just pluck it from the air and go quick and just keep it within my range, and you'll find that you'll do a pretty awesome job. And you'd be surprised at how good it comes the less you focus on it. We actually have seen the more people get into this and detailed into this in the beginning, it actually makes things more complicated and confuses them a lot. So this works really well in 2 ways. Either once you get great at it and you actually know all the numbers, then it works really well. And when you're new and you're able to kind of jump into it and just take action, it works really well. When you're in the middle and you're overanalyzing and you're trying to get better, sometimes it's a little trickier then. Because you are it's that learning curve, you're figuring everything out. So insulation, this one's pretty easy. If we have to insulate like the basement, then it's like $1,000. And if we have to insulate the whole house because maybe we're gutting it, which I would not recommend if you're a new rehabber, I would stay away from that. Maybe it's about $3,000 to insulate the whole house, anywhere to like $5,000 sometimes. But most of the time, the only insulation we're doing is if we're finishing a basement. Most of the time, that's the only insulation we need for that. So about $1,000 for doing a basement is usually enough. HVAC, this is a pretty easy one, and I've got a lot of feedback on this because a lot of people are like, I'm paying so much, how can you get it this cheap? I'll do a quick breakdown, but if you need a unit in most houses, because we are usually doing houses that are about 1,000 to 1,600 square feet, require a 2.5-ton unit for that. So you can go up to 1,600 square feet and as low as 1,000 with a 2.5-ton unit. A 2.5-ton unit is going to run you for labor and material about 2,600 to 3,000. So if you're not sure, you can go with the 3,000 if you're new. If you add ducts, you're going to add 2,000 to 3,000. So it's 3,000 for the unit. That's the HVAC unit, which would be the central air and heat. That's going to be about 3,000. Now, if you have a house that does not have ductwork in it, because maybe it had radiators or baseboard heat, and now you want to add ductwork so we can update it, you need about another 3,000 for that. So we'd put about $6,000 in for the two. So this one's actually pretty easy because for the most part, you know what the unit costs, you know what the ducts cost. Now, next question a lot of people have is, how do I know if I need to replace this? Well, you don't always know, but if the unit's really old, then assume you're going to be replacing it. If the unit's pretty new, then you might be able to save it, but that's something you'll have to get an HVAC guy in to really determine. Waterproofing. This is another one that's pretty predictable, pretty easy. If you need to waterproof a basement, you're going to be at about $45 to $50 per square foot, or per linear foot, I'm sorry, and that's actually going to come out to usually about $4,000 to $5,000. So if you just want to throw $5,000 in for waterproofing, that's what I did for years when I was going through quick. I'd say, hey, trim's $1,000 and $1,000, $2,000, doors are $2,000, $2,500 for tile, waterproofing $5K. You can see how I'm getting in a roll here, right? And when I would do that, my numbers would be really accurate because sometimes things would be a little low, but some things would be high, and they'd all tend to help each other out and work really well. I get more detailed now because I have more knowledge. I don't have to be as loose about it. But with that being said, I had a lot of knowledge then, and it was about getting in and out of the house quickly. Remember, this is the quick Reno estimator, so it's not the quick lesson on this because it takes time to go through all these details. But it does get very quick. You can do this estimate and renovation, like very detailed renovation costs, and like I said, 15 to 30 minutes is very quick. A lot of times contractors will take like 2 days to do this, and so I always prefer to have it. So going into like termite, that's usually just $500 to $650, so that's a simple one. Roof and gutters is usually going to be $100 per square foot for the install and about another $100 for the material. So we're usually about $200 to $250 a square. A square is a 10 by 10. Most roofs are going to be about 10 to 15 squares. So when we think of a roof, if it's a standard roof, just throw $4,000 to $5,000 in and you should have enough to do a roof. For a standard roof, it's a little bigger roof than $5,000 to $7,000, a little smaller roof, maybe like $3,000 to $4,000. So again, keep this pretty simple. If the roof's in pretty good shape and it maybe just needs repairs and you some small work done to it, then maybe just throw $1,000 in, just enough to get somebody up there to clean it up and get it certified. Appliances are pretty easy. They usually, for a standard kitchen, are going to be about $2,000. Stainless steel appliances, they'll run about $1,500 if you need white ones for a rental, but they're only about $2,000 for one of ours. Now, we've got exterior hardscape. So this really, the main thing you'll want to look at that's covered under this is the driveway in bad shape or the walkways going to the house in bad shape. If they are, you can repair them. You don't always have to completely rip them out. Most of the time, we're able to repair them and make them acceptable. Cost of that is $500 to $1,000. And if you got to do all new driveway and all new walkways, you could spend anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 to do concrete. It can be pretty expensive. So for the most part, we try to save that stuff and just get it into an acceptable repair condition where people are happy with it. And granite is a pretty easy one also. It usually is $40 a square foot installed. Again, if you don't want to measure, most kitchens are going to be $1,500 to $2,500. So you can see a standard kitchen is always going to fall in that price point. If you want to throw $2,000 in for granite, it would work out very well. You'd be a very good ballpark for a standard kitchen. Carpet, same thing. When we used to do this very quickly, I have all the breakdowns here. It's $15 a yard for carpet. So if you got 100 yards of carpet, you're going to be $1,500. But to be honest, whenever I did this quick, I would just throw $2,000 because sometimes it'd be 15, sometimes it'd be 23. It would always work out pretty well if I had a nice round number of $2,000. So if you want to do the quick number, that is the quick number. Now siding, same thing. We got all the little breakdowns. It's going to be about roughly around $200 a square to do siding. So most houses are going to be about 13 to 15 squares. So if you have to do a whole house of siding, you're usually looking somewhere between like $6,000 to $9,000. just depending on the size of the house and how big it is. 6 to 9K would go in there, but remember, we don't do siding a lot. Most of the time we just repair it or paint it. I've only done out of like 650 renovations, plus I've only done about maybe 7 or 8 houses where I've done siding. So you can see it's a very low amount of houses that we've done it with. Most of the time it's a lot cheaper to fix or repair, but you do know the cost if you need to do it. Then we have like architect's drawings. We usually pay about $600 for those. We got an alarm. If you're in a bad neighborhood, I do recommend you get an alarm on the house. Any neighborhood where if you would consider it could get broken into, then you need an alarm just to be safe. Now, this is a pretty big subject. Some of you guys are going to not be in Maryland, and you're going to be in areas where well and septic is something you need to do. Personally, in Maryland, I've gotten to the point where I've done about 25 houses with well or septic, and we haven't made a lot of money on them. They definitely have a lot of issues, and they have a lot of unforeseen things that we can't calculate. So I have a great system that I teach in the higher level on how to handle well and septics. But to be honest with you, if you're new to this and you're in an area that has some well and septic, but mostly not, then I would probably recommend to you that you stay away from well and septic. But with that being said, let me give you some of the general costs for it. If you need a new septic system, like the whole system, it's about $10K. If there are some more expensive systems that certain counties will ask for, and they can get as high as $15 or $20K. But for the most part, you're pretty safe at about $10K for that. Wells, usually, if you need like a new well, total well, right, that's going to be about $7K to drill a hole. Most of the time, wells just need like $1,000 or $2,000 in repairs, though. They might need like a wellhead, a pump, or maybe the water needs to be purified. So usually like 1 to 2K, you can get the water clean, get it in good working order. But if you did buy a house that the water flow wasn't good and they had to drill again, that can be pretty expensive. We had a house that we ended up spending $26,000. So it was about $6,000 or $7,000 a hole. And the problem is they drilled really deep and they didn't hit water. So unfortunately, they were like, oh, we got to drill again, and we got to drill again, and we got to drill again. And we ended up drilling 6 holes or 7 holes at like $7K each, and the bill got really expensive. So you can see why I'm not a big fan of doing wells and septics, and so I don't love doing them. But if you're in a neighborhood where that's predominantly what you have, my recommendation to you is become very, very, very proficient and very strong at understanding all the details of like wells, septics, cost, and all that. Because if you are going to be doing a lot of renovations with these, you're going to really need to understand them and really master the best way to work around them so that they don't catch you by surprise. So, and then chimney is for like fireplaces. So usually the repairs for, just getting a fireplace cleaned up and looking good is about 1 to 3K. Now, if it's more than like 1 to 3K, then we always consider closing that fireplace off. So what you can do for about $500 is you can literally just close the fireplace off and make that fireplace decorative. And if you make the fireplace decorative, then it's just about $500 to do it. So, and sometimes you'll hear that it's like $7K to fix a chimney and redo the brick and all that. Well, I won't do that. There's no value in putting that kind of money in it for a first-time home buyer. Now, if you can fix it for pretty cheap and have a fireplace, people do love that. They like having a fireplace, but at the same time, it's going to cost you $8K, it would make more sense just to put some electric logs in there so it looks like a fireplace without all the headache of chopping wood and everything. So next one's pretty complicated, which is foundation. But I'm going to make it more simple by saying that most big foundation issues can be fixed for about 5 to 15K. Now, something to consider, though, is that most houses do not have big foundation issues. You might see some light cracks in the wall. You might see some, very small stair-stepping cracks. You'll hear people say, "Oh, that's a sign it's really bad." For the most part, it's not actually. The things you should be concerned of is when the block is separated and there's 2 different levels to it, or it's caving in. Caving in is when you truly have a serious foundation problem, and that does require a lot of work. But when your wall is nice and smooth and flat and it's not bowed in at all, and it just has some cracks throughout it, that's generally just kind of like what we call settlement cracks. They don't seem to be big issues. But if you don't know and you don't have a lot of knowledge around it, then buy your property with an inspection. Just say, hey, I need to put an inspection on for this because I'm not a foundation expert, and then get some foundation people out, and they'll tell you if you got nothing at all or if it's a big problem. So just know foundations can be pretty expensive, but my best deal I've ever done was a really bad foundation. So if you get something that has foundation issues, your willingness to fix that and understand it will often get you a really great deal. So that's something I wouldn't run from. I actually really learned a lot about foundations, and I've gotten a lot of great deals because of my knowledge around foundations. And then the last but not least is going to be your staging. And staging generally is like $1,000 to $1,500 for 2 to 3 months. I do stage every single house that I buy, so if you are planning on renovating it, you would want to put some staging in there, because we always get a way better result with staging versus not using staging, and it's totally worth the $1,000 to $1,500. It cuts my days on market down. My house will sell faster. It creates that emotional feel that I want all my buyers to have. I want them being emotional and making emotional offers. And staging does a great job of making your house look amazing, like really making it look good. So it's totally worth that $1,000 to $1,500. Just don't spend more than that, because sometimes people try to charge you $2,000 to $3,000. Not worth it. We want to keep it pretty affordable for what we do. And then the last piece of this, which is not actually a line item, but it's a big part of how we run the budget, is you see it says 10% contingency. Now, when houses are standard renovations, we like to put 10% contingency, and what that stands for is it's just stuff we don't know. You ever hear that, well, you don't know what's behind the walls? Well, that's why we have a contingency. Sometimes you don't. Most of the time, that's not the case. Contingency ends up being used for things we just forgot to put in the budget. Or maybe when we talked about, let's make your carpet $2,500, and we find out that it's $3,100 because the house is bigger than we expected or has more carpet than we thought. Well, that $600 that we go over in that category will be taken from the contingency, and that's what we use it for. And if a house is really old, then we will put 15% contingency in it, because it often will need it, because really old houses have a lot of stuff to fix. But for standard renovation, 10% is fine. If you're actually pretty good at this and you've done some renovations and you have a decent track record of being on budget, then you can go at as low as 5% contingency. So this is to protect you. It's for the things you don't know. And you can see with this tool, everything adds up right here, and that's your total. So just based on this little training simulation we did, it'd be a $61,540 renovation. So this is everything you need. If you need this quick Reno estimator and you want to learn to use it, you want to practice it, it's in your resource library, and feel free to use it. It's something that we've used for years and we still love it, and it's one of those tools that's a vital part of my business. I don't think I could live without it. I would hate to go back to the pen and paper and hoping that I get it all right. So take some time to learn this and at least get a basic understanding. And if you get your first renovation, then know that it's go time for you to get much better at this, and really this becomes your Bible through your whole renovation. You will check on this daily as you're renovating, just to keep very, very close and to yourself of the you got to have like very close to your mind, like here's what I need to spend, and make sure you're staying on that budget. So that's the quick Reno estimator.